Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to this Bluetongue virus update webinar and Q&A session. Today is an opportunity for you to hear Bluetongue updates from our industry experts and also put forward any questions you might have about Bluetongue. My name is Zoe Lloyd. I am an animal health and welfare scientist at AHDB, and I'm just going to be going over some very brief housekeeping before handing over to your chair for this evening, Katie James from the National Sheep Association. So I am delighted to be joined today by our speakers. Firstly, we'll be hearing from Raquel Horquera, who is from the Animal, Plant and Health Agency, and will be providing us with some updates on the Bluetongue cases. We will then move on to Charles Milne from the Association of Independent Meat Suppliers, who is going to provide an overview of Bluetongue and the importance of vaccination and really being prepared for the next vector season. And then we're going to move across to Jenny Schmidt, who is a farm vet from Torch Farm Vets, who is going to provide us with some of her in-practice experiences in the Southwest. We will then finish with Ollie Matthews, who is a sheep farmer in the Southwest, who will be sharing with us some of his reasons for vaccinating. So just to cover off a few housekeeping points before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded and the link will be circulated within 24 hours to those who have signed up. If you have any technical difficulties today, please know that the recording is being shared, so you will be able to watch it back. It will also be uploaded onto YouTube, so you're able to share with anyone who may have missed to tune in live. We will begin with an update of the current Bluetongue situation, then move on to some insights and experiences from our speakers. Please note, if you'd like to record your CPD for this webinar, you are very welcome to scan the QR code there in the corner, and this will hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to record. There will be the opportunity at the end to answer questions, so please do put your questions in the chat box at the top right-hand side of your screen. Here you should see a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. At the end of the webinar, you will also get the option to complete a feedback form where you can inform us of questions and topics you're interested in. We would really appreciate it if you could please take 2 minutes to fill this in. It really does help inform us of what you'd like to hear more of. Please also keep an eye out on the Ruminant Health and Welfare and AHDB websites for future webinars too. If I could have there we are. On the theme of webinars, I just wanted to highlight that we have our next webinar on the 8th of October, 5 till 6 p.m. So please do visit the AHDB website if you're interested in signing up for this. We do also have a question submission form available on the AHDB webinars page and through the QR code here on screen. This allows you to submit questions for webinars in the future. And there are also some really useful contacts and resources available via this form. However, please, to submit questions for the current webinar we're in, please do use the question box available on your screen. This QR code is only for future webinars. If I could have the next slide, please. I also just wanted to highlight all the tools and resources we have available on the AHDB and Ruminant Health and Welfare Bluetongue Hub. There are a range of tools designed to help farmers make the decision on whether to vaccinate their stock or not, and they're all completely free to download and use. So please do make use of these. We will be updating the Bluetongue movement checker over the next couple of days in light of the changes to cross-border movements from the 21st September. So please do keep an eye out for this too. And then another really useful tool that's listed here is the vaccine finance calculators that we have available. We have these for sheep, beef and dairy cattle, and these are particularly useful when sort of working out a cost-benefit analysis of vaccinating and working out how much vaccinating might save you in the long term if you were to see Bluetongue on your farm. If I could have the next slide, please. There is also lots of additional support available to you if you are struggling or know of somebody who is. These organisations are also available on the Ruminant Health and Welfare website for you to find out more too. And then lastly, if I could have the last slide, this has been an industry initiative, and I would really like to say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped communicate the importance of vaccination and help to protect our national herds and flocks. All of your support has been really, really vital in getting the resources out there and in helping farmers with a decision on whether to vaccinate or not. So without further ado, I will now hand over to our chair for this evening, Katie. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you, Zoe. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this latest webinar in the Battle Bluetongue series. Very pleased to be asked to chair the webinar this evening. As Zoe said, my name is Katie James and I'm LSA Communications Manager. I also have my own small sheep flock, which following some advice from webinars such as this, I did decide to vaccinate. So I'll be very interested to hear what our speakers have got to share with us this evening. I'd like to thank the speakers for joining us this evening. I'm sure they're going to have lots of valuable experience for us all to learn from. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Raquel, who is our first speaker. Raquel is from APHA, where I believe you are the veterinary head of the field epidemiology team and head of the National Emergency Epidemiology Group. So over to you, Raquel. Can everybody else hear Raquel? Sorry, Raquel, I can't hear you at the moment. Are others able to hear Raquel? Can someone indicate to me a thumbs up or?
No, I can't hear Raquel either.
No, can you hear me now?
Oh,
I can now.
That's it. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think your sound's coming through my Realtek, but anyway, I hope you can hear me okay. Sorry about that. So it was working fine 10 minutes ago. I will be providing the Bluetongue situation update as of yesterday, 16th of September. And next slide, please. It's still stuck in the first slide for me. I don't know if you can see the next one.
Yeah, Raquel, you're on the overview of areas affected.
Okay, I can't see that. I'll trust that way, just synchronize into the slide. So in terms of overview and areas affected, from the 10th of July, there have been 37 cases of Bluetongue 3 in 37 farms, affecting 44 animals. 61% of those animals have been sheep, 32% have been bovine. Single positive animals have been confirmed in all cases, except in 6 of those confirmed premises, where 5 cases with 2 positive animals were confirmed, and in another farm had 3 positive confirmed animals. All cases so far have been detected in England, particularly in Cornwall and Oxfordshire, with 5 affected premises in each of those. No active surveillance is being conducted at the moment. Only testing is due to licensing requirements or through the report case procedures. Next slide, please. In terms of individual positive animals in the same period, out of the 44 positive animals confirmed, there were more positive animals amongst the adult population with 33 individuals compared to young animals under 12 months, where we had 5 individuals. In 6 cases, the age had not been reported, so it was not known to us. We also had more positive animals that were female. We had 21 individuals compared to 16 male individuals. And again, in 7 instances, we didn't have the sex reported. Next slide, please. Over 80% of the cases were detected via the report case protocol. So we have 31 confirmed cases that were reported a suspicion of disease, and nearly half of the holdings affected were sheep holdings. As you can see in the slides, we had 17 cases that were sheep-only holdings. Next slide, please. In terms of detection methods at animal level, over 3/4 of those report cases that were confirmed were in sheep. We had 76% of cases in sheep versus 24% of cases in cattle. And only one of the cases that was detected via a private test, which was carried out due to clinical signs in cattle. Next slide, please. Report cases have been fairly consistent over time, except for this last week, where there have been an increase in the number of confirmed report cases. Next slide, please. Now, there was a question sent to us about the impact of infection in the pregnant cow, and the following information that is coming up in the next slide is based on Bluetongue 8 data from the literature. So next, that's it, you're ahead of me. So if infection of the dam occurs in the first 60 days of pregnancy, this is likely to result in early embryonic death. If infected late, like late in the first trimester or in the first half of the second trimester, then this will likely lead to fetal malformations. And if the dam is infected after day 150, then the calf is more likely to complete normal brain development, but most likely will be PCR positive and maybe ELISA positive as well. And I believe, Katie, this concludes my updates. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Yeah, some interesting data there. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to pass over to Charles Milne. Charles is a previous chief vet in Scotland and has also been chief vet in the state of Victoria in Australia. And Charles is going to talk to us a little bit about the importance of vaccination and maybe address some myths that may be circulating about vaccination currently. Okay, over to you, Charles.
Thanks, Katie. It was thought useful if I gave you all a little bit about my background and experience. Either through fortune or foolishness, I've been involved with a large number of outbreaks in my career, starting early on with BSE and the famous Edwide curry salmonella and eggs, classical swine fever, foot and mouth disease, and then a CVO Scotland, brucellosis, Newcastle disease, avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, and Bluetongue virus. And then when I went down to Australia for an escape from all these things, we had outbreaks of anthrax and BTV. So a lot of experience of outbreaks. And so what are the lessons coming out of these particular instances? Well, I guess the first lesson, and it's an obvious one, is that every outbreak is different and needs to be managed accordingly. The second lesson is stakeholder engagement is absolutely essential, and this sort of event that we're at today is so important, both in terms of disseminating information, but also gathering information for government. The last lesson that I'd like to just share briefly with you is contingency planning. Contingency planning is really important so that all parties can prepare for outbreaks, but as the well-known military adage goes, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. And so they need to change. But if we change what we're doing under contingency plans, then there needs to be a published rationale to explain why that is occurring. So looking at the principles of animal disease control, it's very different to human health outbreaks in that we take a much more utilitarian approach. And economics is really important. In fact, so much so that in 2000, the CEO of the Netherlands, after a major outbreak of avian influenza, said that never again would the Netherlands eradicate a disease at the cost of eradicating the industry. And that's something that we really need to think about in managing diseases going forward. We need to be evidence-based, so science is important. We're subject to World Trade rules through the World Organization for Animal Health and our trading partners in the EU. But other things are really important too. Industry knowledge. What are the movements that are occurring? What are the practices in industry that are impact on disease? And what are the practicalities of some of the controls that we want to implement? So moving on to vaccination. Vaccination is an absolutely key control. It is safe, effective, and vaccines of high quality. In fact, all vaccines for animals are tested by the Veterinary Medicines Directorate and have to undergo stringent testing. So we can have full confidence that these vaccines do what it says on the tin. And maybe looking at a human example on how effective vaccinations can be, if we look at the measles, mumps, rubella, before vaccination, somewhere between 160 and 800,000 cases of measles occurred every year, and there was hundreds of deaths associated from these disease. Post the vaccination programs, we're down to under 1,000 cases a year, with death being a very rare event. Now, there was a lot of myths around MMR vaccine, around autism and other side effects like that. They have been completely discredited. And I think this is a good example to use in the case of Bluetongue. Firstly, we all recognise that in animals we use vaccination all the time. We use vaccination in our pets to protect against the introduction of rabies into Great Britain and against some of the major diseases like distemper. In animals, clostridial disease vaccination is quite normal in farm animals, and as is vaccination for BVD. So this isn't a new concept at all. There have been a lot of claims, as is often the case, about side effects from new vaccines. And, there's been claims that some animals are bored as a result of vaccination. There's no statistics to back this up. Some animals that are bored will have been vaccinated. That's very different from a vaccine causing that abortion. So vaccination is an important and key defence tool, particularly in a disease like that's difficult to control through movement controls because it's a vector spread disease. We've seen already that the number of cases are increasing at the end of the year. That's quite expected in a disease of this nature where the infected images build up through a season. So vaccination remains important this year. But early in the year, we saw some evidence of raised fetal abnormalities and abortions in ruminants. And obviously vaccination is important in protecting for our lambing and calving seasons next year. So the trends of disease, as I've already mentioned, we see with Bluetongue an increasing number of cases as the year progresses, then it falls back over a winter. Raquel mentioned the evidence about BTV8 and the overwintering, particularly in cattle, and that is a very real risk for next season. And just because we've seen a low number of cases this year, it doesn't mean to say that that will be the case next year. It may be that the vaccine has become more established. It may be that conditions are much more suitable for midge activity and vector transmission next year. So vaccination is important. There are a lot of myths going around at the moment that Bluetongue is not circulating. Well, I think the evidence that Raquel's presented disproves that. And again, about these vaccine incidents. And there is a lot of myth-busting material provided by AHDB online that we can use to help against these arguments. And I think as representatives and members of the farming and veterinary community, we have a duty actually to challenge people when they start making these false claims, because false they are. And we can all play a part in that, and hopefully through that increase the vaccine uptake within the country. And I'd like to finish off just by reminding you of what Zoe mentioned at the start of the meeting about the amount of resources online on the AHDB and the Ruminant Health and Welfare websites to help with this disease, both to give you information and to provide you with starter places for conversations with veterinary professionals, or indeed others who are challenging about the control methods in place and how we're managing the disease. So it is important that we address these. The other issue that I'd really like to close on is the importance of reporting disease. There are claims that there's more disease out there than the official statistics suggest, and that's probably the case because in some animals the clinical symptoms are very mild. But I would encourage everybody who has suspicion of disease to report it. There is no benefit in hiding the fact that there is Bluetongue on a farm, but there is a lot of benefit in reporting cases of disease, both in terms of managing the disease itself, but also in terms of informing the industry about risk and how to, you know, where the disease is in the country. But there is another aspect that people often forget, and that is to have a reliable reporting system is very, very important in terms of providing confidence to our trading partners. And that is a really important thing to maintain, not just for Bluetongue, but for when we deal with other disease outbreaks in the future. So, Katie, that's probably enough for me. I'm happy to take questions later on in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Charles. Yeah, as you've just mentioned, we have got some questions coming in. Please do keep posting those in the little question chat box. And then when we've heard from all of our speakers, I will pose those questions to them, and I'm sure they'll be able to give you some useful answers. Okay, so now we hand over to Jenny Schmidt. Jenny is a vet, as Zoe said earlier, with Torch Farm Vets in North Devon, and I think just into Cornwall as well, Jenny. So hopefully you can give us a little perspective on what might be happening down in the southwest of England at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, we also go into Somerset as well. So we're a very large practice, 4 centres. I couldn't tell you how many animals we look after, but so it's a lot. Like Katie, I'm also a part-time sheep servant. I have a very small flock, and I vaccinated my own animals quick smart as well. So we've had no clinical cases in our area yet, and I will underline yet. There's no reason why it's not going to be with us very soon. The closest case that we know of so far is North Taunton, which is on our doorstep. We have vaccinated a lot of animals. We've probably got about 40% of our dairy herds vaccinated and maybe up to 20% of beef and sheep. Speaking to colleagues that represent maybe a dozen other practices in the southwest, it varies a lot, but they're sort of broadly similar. Some people have done as much as 50% of dairies vaccinated. All of our experiences, I think, have been that when the vaccines first became available in the spring, there was a good uptake. Those that really were keen to vaccinate, vaccinated then. Then it stagnated a bit, and now we're beginning to get a little bit more interest in vaccinations again. I do a lot of smallholder work, and I think our best uptake has been amongst our smallholders, because we've actually bent over backwards to try and split bottles and that sort of thing to make sure that people don't have to spend an extraordinary amount of money to vaccinate only a handful of animals. We have not seen any reports of adverse reactions to vaccines. To follow on, I'm going to sort of echo Charles in a couple of points. We've vaccinated an awful lot of animals, or sold a lot of vaccine. And anytime there's a new vaccine or product, it tends to attract the blame for anything that might possibly be attributed to it. And we've not seen that uptick in abortions or any sorts of adverse reactions in cattle. So I can, or sheep, or even goats or alpacas. So I can get behind what Charles is saying. There's no evidence of it causing any problems. And if you think of it from a risk-benefit ratio, we certainly know in sheep the risk is massively high of death. In cattle, we're seeing milk drops and abortion, or barren cows, dummy calves, that sort of thing. So I think the risk-benefit ratio, it's a bit of a no-brainer. What we found really useful is all the resources available online on the Ruminant Health and Welfare website, especially the I email a lot of the symptom checker fact sheet, and we use the cost calculator for whether or not it's a good idea to vaccinate. We use them at health plan reviews. We've had them at shows, so when people have been talking, I've been able to whip out the laptop and go through it with them. On attestation visits, and yeah, anytime when I get a phone call and inquiry, I can just send out an email with lots of links. So the online resources have been really good. Also, to echo Charles, I also suspect that the disease is a lot more widespread than we currently suspect. The Oxfordshire case, I heard a little bit more detail about because I'm in a WhatsApp group with the vet who reported it. And this sheep ticked very few of the boxes for the symptoms of Bluetongue. It was basically, she was a little bit lethargic, off feed, and had hot feet, lame, but no crusting, no eyes, no coronary band lesions, nothing like that. And it only got sampled or flagged as a Bluetongue case, A, because it was owned by a smallholder. I suspect this sheep had a name, and because the attending vet was a bloody switched on vet. And I don't want to say that the symptoms, these cases that are going under the radar are less severe. This sheep actually died, but if she'd been in a small, in a commercial flock, she would have been completely under the radar. She wouldn't have, she had nothing that would have alerted anyone to potential Bluetongue. She just would have been seen as a sheep achieving her life's ambition a little bit ahead of time as far as the farmer's concerned. So I would really encourage anyone who's got any doubts is to speak to your vet. I really wanted that list of resources, like with the Farming Community Network and all the others, your local vet, speak to them if you've got any questions. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was one of the big barriers to surveillance, I think, is the reluctance of producers or farmers to maybe report a case, especially down here in a high TB area. I think the underlying relationship of farmers to AHDB or DEFRA is adversarial. And I just wanted to reassure farmers that now that all of England is in a restriction zone, there are no adverse consequences for you if you've got a suspected case or even a proven case. The animal will not be culled. She may cull herself. There will not be movement restrictions. There will not be additional testing in your herd or anything like that. There's no reason to not report, and there's plenty of reasons to report. If anything, it might help make your neighbours more aware. It might make you more aware, and you decide to vaccinate. But now that all of England is under the same restriction rules, there's absolutely no reason to not report. So please don't let that be a barrier. And again, just to underline that, your vet is there at the end of the phone if you've got any questions. That's me done. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, again, to hear a little bit more about, you know, an individual case and the sort of perhaps not so typical symptoms, yeah, it's perhaps a little concerning, but definitely important that we hear that, I think, on the call. So thank you. Right, our final speaker this evening is Ollie Matthews. Ollie is a sheep farmer, and Ollie also has cattle, I believe, just on the edge of Exmoor. And Ollie, you took the decision, I think, to vaccinate fairly early on. So I think you're going to share with us your reasons why. Thank you, Ollie.
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me? Is that all right? Yep. Good. Yeah. So we did vaccinate. So we sat down early in the spring with our vet. We've got about 2,000 breeding ewes. And he sort of flagged to us fairly early on, maybe like mid-Feb, and said, "This is on the radar. Are you aware of it?" And we kind of were-ish. So then we sat down and said, "Yeah, what's the worst case scenario?" Because obviously we looked to Holland. And he said, well, in Holland, 70%, if the flocks are getting infected, 30% of animals are showing clinical signs broadly, and 70% of that 30% are then ending up dead. So we worked it back to potentially, you know, 400 and very, very crudely, 420 dead sheep on our farm, and a vaccination cost of £5,000, which, I mean, smarted at the time. I didn't really want to part with my money, but I kind of looked at it as, you know, very broadly, spending £5,000 to potentially save in the region of 100,000. You know, probably 60 grand worth of breeding stock, plus then all the associated costs. And, you know, actually the other reason was, you know, 400 dead sheep would be pretty demoralizing as well, and I didn't really want that on farm. So that was kind of how we got to the point of vaccinating. We then timed it in and vaccinated with Heptavac in our pre-lambing Heptavac dose. Did them both at the same time with no problems at all. Yeah.
Okay, that was a nice quick summary there, Ollie, but I'm sure you're going to be valuable when we've got some questions coming in now. Okay, so if all our speakers this evening could come back onto the screen, please. Then we have had quite a lot of questions in the question thread, and we also had some ahead of this evening. So I will start with some of the questions that we had in advance of the webinar this evening, and then I will move to the questions that have been posted this evening. So please feel free to come in. I'd also like to welcome Gordon Hickman, that has been able to join us, and Gordon is the lead of exotic seas at DEFRA, I believe. I hope I got your title correct, Gordon. Okay, right, so I'll start with the first question then. So could you answer that? Have any of the Bluetongue cases that have been confirmed been in vaccinated animals?
I can answer that if you can hear me again. Can you hear me? No?
We can,
yes,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, so out of all the cases this season, we don't have vaccination status information about every single case. So we might have information about around 19 of those cases. And only one was in a very recently vaccinated animal. All the others were unvaccinated.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. Okay, next one is a vaccine question again, that's been asked in a couple of places. Do we have an update on the duration of the immunity of vaccines? Obviously, some farmers vaccinated, maybe 6 months ago, and now there's a concern that a booster might soon be needed. Do we have any information on the duration of the vaccine?
No, maybe I can take that as well. So far, information from manufacturers is that they have not provided data on established duration of immunity.
Can I chime in on that, Katie?
Yes, please do, Jenny, yeah.
This is a new vaccine. I think these are new vaccines. I think it's amazing that we've got this set up that a disease can emerge and we've got effective vaccines available commercially so quickly. So I think that's fantastic. We won't have great duration of immunity information because they've just not been around for that long. I think the vaccine manufacturers have inferred the duration of immunity from similar vaccines. I don't think there's much that's actually new in these vaccines. The sort of the building blocks that you use to make them, most of them are tried and tested, and it's just the new antigens that they're plugging in. I think if you have concerns over whether animals need a booster, that's a discussion you ought to be having with your vet, because you can always decide to go off-label. I myself, I'm not sure that there's any inherent risk in vaccinating again sooner. So if you have high-value animals or animals with names or animals that are not licensed to the vaccine, say goats or alpacas, especially goats, we know are poor immune responders, so their immunity might be waning sooner. Have a discussion with your vet about whether or not you want to go in with a booster vaccine earlier than the recommended 12 months.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, so there's a few questions about sort of what has happened to the animals that have been confirmed as having Bluetongue, how many of them have recovered or died, and then also moving on to treatment of those animals, what has the treatment involved, and what has the success rate for this clinical the treatment been? I think, is that a Raquel or a Jenny question perhaps? I know, Jenny, you haven't seen any cases in your practice, so maybe Raquel, you have some information.
I've got some information from the impact study we conducted some months ago. So the majority of animals recovered. I mean, I don't have at my fingertips right now the data on number of deaths, but it was small numbers per farm. Just bearing in mind that this impact study was a self-reporting data set, so we contacted farmers that had confirmed cases and some were willing to participate, and it's self-reported data again. In terms of follow-up treatments, around half of them were reporting to have treated the animals with non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and some of them with antibiotics, but the majority of the treatment involved non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. But again, this is from the reduced data set we had a few months ago.
So Katie, just a word of caution here. Yes, at the moment, the vast majority of cases we know have recovered, but there is evidence in other countries that is very high mortality associated with this virus. And as I said in my presentation, we can't take for granted that just because there's been a low number of cases this year, that next year's conditions won't be much more supportive to virus or mid-replication. So I wouldn't like people to use this as an excuse not to vaccinate.
Okay, and I think you know, your answers there have indicated the answer to the next question, which is BTV likely to affect animals next year? And linked with that, there was also a question, you know, if it's a different strain, BTV8, could that be different to BTV3? Charles, you're muted at the moment.
So yes, it absolutely could be different to BTV8, but the evidence from BTV8 in 2008 was that it could overwinter, and it's a reasonable assumption that this virus will act the same, not least because we saw that raised fetal abnormalities and abortions in the spring of this year, which could have been caused in part or in totally by Bluetongue virus. So I think it's a sensible precaution to assume that it will overwinter. Even if it doesn't overwinter, there's no reason to suggest that it couldn't be introduced by midges blowing across the channel again next year. So whilst we can never read the future, we can never say there will or won't be diseases next year. I think as a sensible precaution, we should assume there will be disease next year.
Okay, thank you,
Charles.
Charles.
Add on to that, I think there's plenty of, I know we have this low seasonal vector period where the virus can't replicate in the midge when it's below 12 degrees, I think. But I continue to see midges in nice warm cattle sheds throughout the winter. So I can't see us not having even infected midges and a cycle completing over the winter as well.
And I think all the, sorry, it's Gordon Hickman here, all the available evidence is that this year's outbreaks have been caused by overwintered virus, whether that's been in you know, newborn calves, dummy calves, etc., or the odd midge that survived. There's no evidence that it blew over this time from the near continent. So yeah, it did overwinter, and it almost certainly will again next year. We don't know about Bluetongue 8. We will be doing our normal annual surveillance kicking off in November time, and only then will we possibly know whether we've got Bluetongue 8 as well.
To jump back on the vaccine bandwagon and to borrow one of the phrases from the TB control advice team is control the controllable. There's lots of things about this that we can't control. We can't control the midges. Even just putting on lots of insecticide is not enough protection. The only good protection we have is vaccination. And even when you look at the replacement cost of a ewe, it's a very clear-cut decision for me that vaccination is a cost-effective insurance policy. The unfortunate thing about insurance policies like vaccines is you don't know when they're working. If they've done a really good job, you think, oh, well, that was a waste of money. I didn't get it, did I? So talk to you a bit about vaccinations.
Okay, there are several questions sort of linked to perhaps, you know, the overwintering and when the risk period might lower. There's one here saying, you know, sort of what temperature again do we sort of expect the midge activity to reduce, and then would the risk from the midges be lower with now the weather has changed from that very warm, dry weather we experienced in summer to more wind and rain?
So
well,
Oh, go for it.
After you, Rico.
So going to say it's just not the change in temperature, it's the cumulative temperature that the virus needs to have sustained over time in order to complete the extrinsic incubation period in the midge. So that doesn't change. We're still monitoring that. We're still monitoring that. So the temperatures over time in the different regions are past that threshold. So that is still the same, whether it is a sudden change or not. We still monitor that cumulative temperature over time.
Remember, the cases that we confirmed today or tomorrow or yesterday will have been infected, 10, 12, 2 weeks ago, when it was a lot warmer. And so there's obviously, you've got to remember, there's that lag in finding these new cases, and anything found.
What I was going to say, Katie, is that the relaxation in movement controls on the 21st of September in Scotland and Wales are based on the evidence that the virus rate of replication will be much lower at that time of year. And there is indeed a safety margin built into that. So looking at the previous 10 years and the temperatures that the devolved administrations have experienced, the 21st of September is a date that they are comfortable at, that the virus replication will be low.
Okay, thank you. Jenny,
well,
you mentioned...
Remember, if you are in England, there are infected midges flying about and there's local transmission. So there's a much bigger source of virus. And obviously, in Scotland and Wales, they'll be looking at protected animals going across the border that are much lower risk than the animals we've got here.
Totally accept that, Gordon. It's just virus replication could be considered to be lower, and I was just explaining that the rationale for the date of the 21st of September was that temperatures are historical temperatures would suggest that is a time when replication would be reduced.
Agreed.
Okay, with those changes coming up in Wales and Scotland, do you expect to see any upcoming changes to the All England restricted zone in the near future?
Well, I think from an England perspective, you won't see any changes. We intend to keep the restricted zone where it is. It would, Charles made the very valid point. We've got to make sure that we don't kill the industry by having our controls, and that's one of the reasons why we've moved to an RZ that covers the whole of England. Obviously, it's down to Wales and Scotland what they do, but at the moment they don't have disease, so why would they change anything?
Okay, I think I have maybe a sort of not a final question, but a final question on the restriction zones. Somebody has asked that if Bluetongue serotype 8 comes here, would we make an all of England RZ rather than having small zones? So I presume this is assuming that the RZ as it is now goes away, and then if it came back, would we start with the smaller zones again, or be straight back into one all England restriction zone?
So I think the answer is it depends. So I think the current RZ will stay the current RZ. We can't really reduce it because we would need to do all the surveillance to prove that there wasn't disease in the bit that we reduced it from, and that takes a couple of years of surveillance, etc., and it's just not economic to do that surveillance at the moment. I think it depends on when we find, if we find, and when in the year we find Bluetongue 8. If there was a plausible chance that it was a single incursion and there wasn't circulation, then we might look at premises level controls, etc. But it would be on top of the existing RZ. You won't just wipe the RZ away and start again. So it would be additional controls. I think the most likely thing is if we find it, it'll just be a Bluetongue 8 and a Bluetongue 3 RZ rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you.
But, we'll just look at the situation on the day and work that through in the normal way.
Okay, there's a few sort of standalone specific questions that I'm sure will be quickly answered. If you were vaccinating alpacas, is it just a single dose of the Boltavo vaccine that would be required?
I can field this one. All 3 vaccines are equally unlicensed for alpacas. We have been recommending, as per the advice from the British Camelid Veterinary Society, is 2 doses 3 weeks apart. I'm not sure we've got any way of monitoring how long that immunity lasts. So we will be thinking about discussing when to revaccinate. Certainly with goats, I'm probably keener on seeing them revaccinate sooner, because you know goats, their immunity to most things is not great, and the response to vaccines drops away quite quickly. But yeah, alpacas, 2 doses at the normal sheep dose rate, 3 weeks apart.
Okay, thank you. Talking about the vectors of the disease, are deer a vector of Bluetongue?
Sorry.
I don't know who wants to pick that one up. I mean, I think
No.
colleagues in Herbright will say that, you know, clearly deer can be infected. You've seen from Raquel's slide that, you know, we have had 3 farmed deer, you know, confirmed infected. But what they say is that they're not a substantive reservoir in the epidemiology of this. Yes, you might think there's a lot of wild deer out there, but compared to the number of, you know, cattle out there, even in, you know, some of the lower dense areas, that they aren't a significant factor in the reservoir for, you know, overwintering or anything else like that. But clearly they can get infected.
Okay, thank you. I know Jenny mentioned that, you know, sort of there's nothing to be feared of, you know, reporting your suspected cases on farm. There was no, you know, further testing necessarily of other animals on your farm. But somebody has asked the question, you know, why are APHA not testing more animals on farms where Bluetongue is being confirmed? They're using the example that in 2007, when there was BTV8, all animals were being tested, I believe.
I guess it's a very different set of circumstances, isn't there? You know, there isn't anything to be gained economically or epidemiologically from testing every animal. You know, we're looking to identify which farms have Bluetongue 3 rather than the prevalence within that. You know, yes, we'd love to do some studies to look at, you know, within herd and between herd prevalences, etc. But this is now, you know, we've got an England-wide restricted zone. It's a very different set of circumstances to, you know, back in 2007-8, and again a very different set of circumstances to if and when you know, Wales or Scotland get a case. And I'm sure there would be a whole different epidemiological sampling programme if there were cases in Wales and Scotland. God forbid that there is, but we're just in a different stage of the epidemiology of this outbreak. I don't know, Kat, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I was going to thank you, Gordon. That is also about confirming infected herds or flocks. So we don't need to know the individual status of each single animal. So once there is at least one positive animal in that submission, that's enough for us to classify that as an infected flock or herd.
I might ask a question of our DEFRA colleagues here. At the moment, to my knowledge, there isn't any passive anonymous surveillance going on at the VICs with blood samples that come in for other diseases. Is that us missing a trick? Like, I can recall some bloods I sent in for a case of malignant catarrhal fever that was negative, but it shares a lot of clinical signs with Bluetongue. That would have been I would have thought a great opportunity to just do some passive surveillance on those samples.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at that. I mean, I think obviously if it goes through the VIC, we will be ideally looking to find a diagnosis as opposed to a DNR, and I guess there could be a discussion, you know, with you as the submitting vet as to whether we should test for Bluetongue along that lines. Yeah, but we can think of that if necessary. We do test an awful lot of animals. You know, we've obviously presented the ones that are positive. You know, well over 50% of the cases, I forget the numbers now, that we test are negative. But we'd always encourage, private vets and farmers to explore what is causing it one way or the other. So in the similar way, if you've run out of things, consider Bluetongue, but equally, if you've ruled Bluetongue out, look at the other things.
I mean, it may be helpful, Gordon, if there's a lot of samples being tested and a negative, that the negative results are published alongside the positive ones, because it gives people confidence that level of surveillance is being undertaken.
Yeah, we can obviously think about that. Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Charles.
Okay, someone has asked, is there or should there be research done on which animals are most susceptible?
I mean, in terms of host susceptibility, that is well known for Bluetongue. If some are more susceptible than others or present with a clinical presentation more severe than others, that was one of the initial aims of the impact study. It was more of exploratory analysis to check whether we could identify any initial trends on that, either a species or breeds more affected, but we didn't find any of those avenues to pursue in terms of one breed or some species more reported as others. I mean, the literature for all serotypes is usually Bluetongue presents in a more asymptomatic way in cattle compared to sheep, with some exceptions for some serotypes, but otherwise that is the well-known facts in literature.
And that's supported by experience in Australia, where the sheep are just not permitted in law to be kept in the northern parts of Australia because of the risk of Bluetongue. So yeah, we do see a lot more clinical symptoms usually in sheep than cattle. Sorry, Gordon.
No, I think we need to also discuss what we mean by susceptible. I mean, I think there's good evidence that cattle are more likely to be bitten by midges, and so from that perspective, they're more likely to get infected than sheep. But equally, the clinical presentation in sheep tends to be more severe, and I think we're still seeing that. But yet, the time of the year that Bluetongue is circulating, maybe the sort of the iceberg effects of this in terms of fertility, etc. Maybe more seen in cattle, in spring calving cows, etc. So I think it's a really good
point. It's a really good point, Gordon, because although you see it in the sheep more, the cattle are just as important as multiplying the virus up. So to say they're less susceptible is misleading, because they're equally important in terms of the disease cycle and the epidemiology.
And I think that's why you really, really do need to talk to your private vet to look at your circumstances, your calving, your lambing patterns. You will be different to, the guy down the road potentially. So that's why that's all we're saying, really. Please talk to your private vet, talk it through. It may not be right for you. It may not be economic for you. You may be at less risk than others, but please talk to your private vet.
Okay, thank you. We've not got very long now, so I'll just do a couple more questions. One is just carrying on with that risk, that susceptibility. Someone has asked, is the risk in sheep so high in native flocks? Stating that the experience in the EU has shown that native breeds of sheep and cattle have not been as seriously affected.
Again, that's one of the things that we try to dig into with the impact study, but we couldn't assign high likelihood of presenting with a more clinical severe presentation to one breed of another. Comparing with the near continent as well, just be aware that the industry structure is very different to ours, and obviously breeds over there as well, they're very different to ours. But with the data we had this last season, we couldn't find any significant difference in terms of breeds more affected than others.
Yeah, and there's a real risk that people get false assurance by making these assumptions and choose not to vaccinate. and then if disease gets into the farm, you could face significant losses. So again, it's important to talk to your vet and get the information about what's best for you.
Also, the native breeds, they're likely to have a smaller gene pool. Maybe they're more important to protect as well.
Yeah. At least think about your tups anyway.
Okay, the final question then that we'll have to have this evening is just one that we've perhaps not touched on about pre or post movement tests. It says, with rules changing after the 21st of September, rams and bulls still needing to be pre or post movement tested, can it be guaranteed to turn around the blood tests in less than 7 days from taking the bloods and movement? Well, yeah, for it all to be completed within the 7 days.
So there's, as long as you get them to the lab in good time, you'll get that lab turnaround in 3 days. But you've got to get the samples to the lab. So if you desperately need that movement, think carefully about how you post them and when you post them. Noting, of course, that they don't test over the weekend. So work backwards, and sometimes it's worth paying a little bit more on the postage to make sure that they get there, rather than sitting in some post office somewhere. But the lab are very good at turning around within their 3 days.
And I think I've heard Gordon just to double check your paperwork as well, just to make sure everything is correct in sending those tests off.
Yeah, if it's one of our sort of tests that we've given you a code, if you like, to get a free test, make sure you put that on there, please, because otherwise you'll get charged. And secondly, if this is a license, i.e. a pre-movement, you must put your license reference on, because otherwise Pirbright won't know. Yes, it will be sent to the licensing team in Weybridge, but they won't know to match it up to a license, etc. So please put it on there, front, left and centre, your license reference. And again, if you're a private vet out there, use the latest version of the Pirbright form, because that's got all the boxes in. It'll just point you to put it in the right place. So go onto the website, download the latest version, just in case you've got an old version sitting in the cupboard somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you everybody. Apologies, there are a few questions I'm afraid that we've run out of time for. You know, as Zoe said at the beginning, there is another webinar on the 8th of October. So hopefully, if it's a question that cannot be asked before then, it is something that we can have a conversation about then. But thank you to everyone for joining this evening. There's lots of very useful information shared there. If there is no further comments from our speakers, we will finish the webinar this evening, and as a reminder, it will be available on YouTube in the near future to watch back if required. Thank you everyone, have a nice evening.
Okay.